The silver pitcher trembled in her hands as Elena Voss leaned toward the most dangerous man in the room and whispered 5 words that would either save his empire or end her life. Your translator is lying, sir. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the quiet courage of ordinary people standing up for what's right, smash that like button, drop a comment, share this with someone who needs a little hope today, and subscribe to Shadow Boss Tales so you never miss a story like this one. And before we go further, tell me, where in the world are you watching from tonight? I read every single comment, so don't be shy. The Meridian Hotel restaurant overlooked the Cannes Harbor, all glass and gold and quiet money, the kind of place where waitstaff learned to be invisible. Elena had worked there for 3 years, ever since she'd left Bucharest with nothing but a suitcase and a stubborn belief that hard work eventually paid off. She spoke 5 languages fluently, a gift from a childhood spent moving between countries with her diplomat father before everything fell apart, his death, her mother's illness, the debts that swallowed their savings whole. Nobody at the Meridian knew she understood German as easily as she understood French or Italian. To them she was simply the quiet one who refilled water glasses and never made eye contact with the guests, because eye contact invited questions, and questions invited people finding out how desperate she truly was. That desperation had a name and a deadline. Her mother's treatment in a private clinic outside Bucharest cost more each month than Elena earned in 3, and the letter she'd received that morning made it clear, without payment within 2 weeks, the clinic would discontinue care. She'd read it standing in the staff bathroom, hands shaking, mascara running, before splashing cold water on her face and walking back onto the floor with a smile stitched on so tight it hurt. The private dining room had been reserved that evening for Dominic Rourke, a name whispered more than spoken aloud in certain circles of Marseille and beyond. Officially he ran a shipping and logistics empire. Unofficially, everyone in the industry understood that empire moved more than cargo. He was a man built like consequence itself, tattoos climbing from his collar to his knuckles, dark eyes that missed nothing, and a reputation for loyalty so fierce that betrayal in his orbit rarely ended in mere apology. Beside him sat 2 elder statesmen of his organization, Victor Marchetti and Otto Falk, men whose calm exteriors did nothing to hide the weight of decades in a business built on trust and its violent absence. Behind them stood security, still as statues, sunglasses masking whatever thoughts passed behind their eyes. Across the table sat the German delegation, men from a Hamburg logistics conglomerate looking to formalize a partnership worth, by Elena's estimation from the fragments she'd overheard while pouring wine, somewhere north of 40 million euros. Between the 2 parties sat the translator, a slim, immaculately dressed man named Klaus Reiner, hired specifically for this meeting because Dominic Rourke did not speak German and needed every word rendered with absolute precision. Precision, after all, was the entire point of hiring a translator. Trust was the currency being spent tonight, more valuable than the deal itself. Elena moved around the table refilling glasses, present in the way furniture is present, and that was when she first heard it. The German delegate leaning toward his colleague, voice low, mentioning a percentage, 12%, he said, a service fee that would be quietly diverted before the contract's official terms were even finalized, something about an account in Liechtenstein. Klaus Reiner, when he turned to relay the sentence to Dominic, said instead that the delegate was simply confirming standard shipping insurance costs, nothing structural, nothing to worry about. Elena's hands went cold around the pitcher. She told herself it wasn't her business. She told herself that whatever games powerful men played with each other's money was not a burden she needed to carry, that she had enough weight already pressing on her chest with her mother's illness and the letter folded in her apron pocket like a ticking clock. She retreated to the service station and stood there breathing, trying to convince herself that silence was safety, that in a room full of dangerous men the smartest thing a waitress could do was disappear. But then she thought of her mother's hands, thin now, the way they used to hold Elena's face and tell her that the measure of a person wasn't what they had, but what they were willing to risk for what was right. Her mother hadn't raised a coward. And more than that, beneath the fear, something colder and clearer was rising in Elena, a plain recognition that a lie this size, left unspoken, could destroy a man's fortune and possibly his life, and that she alone in that room understood both languages well enough to know it. She returned to the table with the pitcher, moving slowly along the edge until she stood just behind Dominic Rourke's chair. Every instinct told her this was madness. Waitresses did not interrupt multi-million-euro negotiations between men who solved disagreements with more finality than lawsuits. But she leaned down as if adjusting his water glass, and in a voice so quiet only he could hear it, she said the words in accented but clear French, the language she guessed he'd feel safest hearing something delicate in. Your translator is lying, sir. He is telling you insurance costs when the German said something about a 12% diversion into a Liechtenstein account. For one full second, the entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath, though only 2 people in it knew anything unusual had happened. Dominic Rourke did not move. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly, his eyes flicking once toward Klaus Reiner, who was smiling pleasantly at the German delegate as though nothing in the world were wrong. Then Dominic set down his wine glass with deliberate calm and asked Elena, still in that same low French, to repeat exactly what she had heard, word for word, and to explain how she happened to understand German at all. She told him, quickly and honestly, that she'd grown up moving through Europe with her father, that German had simply been one of the languages of her childhood, the same as French and Italian, and that she had heard the delegate mention specifically an account structure that Klaus had not translated at all. Her voice shook, but she did not look away from him, because some part of her had already decided that whatever happened next, at least she would not have stayed silent while a man was cheated in front of her. Dominic Rourke was quiet for a long moment, the kind of silence that made grown men in his organization visibly straighten in their chairs. Then, without raising his voice, he asked Victor Marchetti, in Italian this time, to quietly verify the girl's claim by having someone check the account structure the Germans had proposed on paper. Victor excused himself smoothly, stepped into the hallway with his phone, and returned 4 minutes later with his expression carefully blank in the way men in that world learned to keep their faces when the news was bad. He confirmed it. The contract's fine print, buried in an appendix the Germans clearly hoped would go unread that evening, included exactly the diversion structure Elena had described. What happened next unfolded with a coldness that made Elena's stomach turn even though she'd been the one to trigger it. Dominic Rourke thanked the German delegation for their time, in English now, his voice pleasant and utterly without warmth, and informed them that the deal, as structured, was no longer of interest, though he remained open to renegotiating terms that reflected honesty rather than convenient omissions. The Germans went pale, stammering explanations that convinced no one. Klaus Reiner, understanding instantly that his small betrayal had been discovered, rose from his chair with the practiced smoothness of a man who had perhaps done this exact maneuver before, for other clients, other deals, skimming his own quiet percentage from both sides of every negotiation he ever translated. Security moved toward him without needing to be told, and he was escorted from the room with a firmness that left no room for protest. His career in that industry almost certainly ended by morning. Elena stood frozen through all of it, certain that having exposed one betrayal, she had likely signed up for whatever consequence came to those who involved themselves in matters far above their station. She had seen enough films, heard enough rumors about men like Dominic Rourke, to believe that gratitude in that world was often thinner than the danger of simply knowing too much. She began quietly backing toward the kitchen door, already composing in her mind the version of tonight she would tell no one. But Dominic Rourke stopped her with a single word, spoken gently, almost tiredly, as though the weight of a long evening had finally settled onto him. He asked her to sit down, gesturing to the empty chair beside him where Klaus Reiner had been sitting only minutes before. Elena hesitated, glancing at Victor and Otto, who watched with something unreadable, before finally lowering herself into the seat, spine straight, hands folded in her lap like a woman awaiting sentencing rather than gratitude. What Dominic Rourke said to her then, quietly, in that same low voice he'd used earlier, was that in his world, loyalty was rarer than money and honesty rarer still, and that a woman willing to risk everything to tell a stranger an uncomfortable truth, expecting nothing in return, was worth more to him than any translator with a diploma and a hidden percentage. He asked her name, and when she told him, he asked what had brought her to that restaurant, to that life, and she found herself, against every instinct of self-preservation she'd built over 3 years of professional invisibility, telling him about her mother, the clinic, the letter folded and refolded so many times in her apron pocket that its creases had gone soft. He listened without interrupting, and when she finished, he simply nodded once, the way men who are used to solving problems nod when a problem has been laid clearly before them. He told her that the 12% the Germans had tried to steal that evening amounted to nearly 5 million euros, money that would now remain in his accounts precisely because she had chosen to speak. He said that a debt like that deserved to be honored, and that her mother's clinic would receive payment in full by the end of the week, not as charity, he said carefully, watching her face for the pride he suspected lived there, but as compensation for services that had genuinely saved him from a catastrophic loss. He offered her, too, a position within his organization as a translator and cultural liaison, work that paid more in a month than she currently earned in half a year, work that would let her stop disappearing and start, finally, being seen for everything she actually was. Elena Voss sat in that chair with tears she couldn't quite hold back, not from sadness this time but from the strange, overwhelming relief of watching years of quiet fear lift all at once, and she thought of her mother's hands again, and the letter in her pocket that no longer felt like a countdown to disaster but like the closing page of a chapter she was finally allowed to leave behind. If this story touched your heart even a little, if you believe that honesty still matters in a world that so often rewards convenient lies, please take a moment to like this video and leave a comment telling me which part moved you most. Your support means more than you know, and it helps stories like Elena's find the people who need them. And before we close tonight, I want to ask you something directly. Have you ever had a moment where telling an uncomfortable truth changed the entire course of your life, for better or worse? Write it in the comments below. I read every one, and I'd love to know your story too. 6 months later, Elena stood in a different room, no longer in an apron but in a tailored blazer, translating a negotiation in Milan on Dominic Rourke's behalf, her mother healthy enough now to call her every evening just to hear about her day. She had learned, in the strangest way possible, that the world rewards not the loudest voices in the room, but the honest ones, spoken quietly, at exactly the moment they matter most. And somewhere in Cannes, a hotel restaurant still ran its evening service, glasses still refilled, waitstaff still moving unnoticed through candlelit rooms, none of them knowing that one of their own had once looked a dangerous man in the eye and chosen truth over silence, and that the truth, in the end, had chosen her back.